Everything you learned about the Maya might be a complete misunderstanding. This was not a simple society of jungle farmers, but a sophisticated civilization of astronomers, mathematicians, and visionary artists. We are about to uncover 30 specific artifacts that directly challenge the history books, each one a piece of a puzzle that forces a total rewrite of the ancient world. These objects reveal lost sciences, secret histories, and connections across continents that were never supposed to exist. What single discovery would make you question everything you thought was true about the past? The oldest surviving book from the Americas holds secrets that shatter our perception of time. The Dresden Codex is not merely a fragile bark paper manuscript, but a sophisticated astronomical almanac, its pages filled with precise calculations that map the heavens with breathtaking accuracy. Within its intricate glyphs and painted figures, Mayan scribes compiled tables predicting the complex cycles of Venus with an error margin of just 1 day in 500 years. They could forecast solar eclipses and track the movements of the moon with a precision that European astronomers of the same era would have found astonishing. This was not primitive stargazing, it was a highly developed scientific discipline, a testament to a culture that viewed time itself as a sacred, calculable force. To comprehend the Codex is to understand that the Maya operated with a mathematical and celestial science that demands we rewrite the very timeline of human intellectual achievement. Yet the Dresden Codex contains far more than astronomical charts. Its pages descend from the cosmic to the earthly, detailing complex almanacs for agriculture and intricate rituals meant to appease powerful deities. One section is devoted entirely to the rain god Chok, outlining precise ceremonies and offerings meant to summon life-giving storms. Modern minds might dismiss these as mere superstition, but what if they were something more? These prophecies and rituals were not random pleas to the heavens. They were timed with astonishing precision to coincide with the dry and wet seasons, suggesting the Maya saw a direct, calculable link between celestial events, ceremonial practice, and the natural world. This was a system where science and spirit were not separate. The prayers to Chok were likely scheduled using the same sophisticated calendar that tracked Venus, a profound integration of belief and empirical observation. Could these rituals represent a lost understanding of environmental psychology, a way for society to collectively prepare for and influence the cycles upon which their survival depended? The Codex challenges us to see their world not as a choice between reason and religion, but as a unified reality where chanting a prayer was as logical as calculating a lunar eclipse. But the celestial science of the Dresden Codex was only one part of the story. A second surviving book, the Madrid Codex, turns our gaze from the cosmos directly down to Earth, revealing a civilization deeply engaged with the practical arts of survival. Where the Dresden mapped the heavens, the Madrid documents the rhythms of the village, its pages filled with vibrant scenes of daily Maya life. Here you will find meticulous illustrations of hunters setting snares for deer, artisans weaving intricate textiles on backstrap looms, and beekeepers carefully tending to their native stingless bees. This was not a society solely of elite priests and astronomers. It was a complex, functioning world of farmers, craftspeople, and hunters, all bound together by a sophisticated economic network. The Codex serves as a detailed almanac for these activities, prescribing the most auspicious days for planting crops, for conducting a successful hunt, or for harvesting honey. This practical guidebook completely shatters the popular image of the Maya as a people consumed only by mysterious rituals and bloodletting. They were deeply pragmatic, their spirituality woven into the very fabric of their agriculture and craftsmanship. The act of beekeeping was not just a chore, it was a ceremony timed by the stars. The weaving of cloth was not merely practical, it was an art form imbued with cultural and symbolic meaning. This artifact forces us to replace the stereotype of a shadowy, lost civilization with the reality of a vibrant, resilient society that mastered both the cosmic and the commonplace. How many other ancient cultures have we misunderstood because we only looked for their grand temples and missed the profound wisdom in their daily lives? The third surviving codex takes this unified vision of reality and stretches it across an almost unimaginable span of time. The Paris Codex, though tragically fragmented, contains a prophetic chronicle that maps out 13 cycles, each a staggering 256 years long. This was not a simple calendar. It was a grand cosmological clock, a vision of time so vast it challenges our modern, linear perspective entirely. Where we see history as a straight line from past to future, the Maya perceived great wheels turning, with eras of creation and transformation repeating in majestic, predictable patterns. This codex provided a guide to these cycles, a prophetic almanac for the very destiny of their world. Its pages suggest that for the Maya, the future was not an unknown frontier, but a landscape of returning patterns that could be anticipated and prepared for, much like the changing seasons. How would your own outlook on the world shift if you believed the next 500 years were part of a knowable, repeating cycle rather than a complete mystery? Beyond its immense timelines, the Paris Codex offers another profound surprise, a section detailing what many scholars interpret as a Maya zodiac. Just as the Dresden Codex charted planets, this manuscript mapped the constellations, linking celestial patterns to the fates of people and the character of entire time periods. Each sign was not just a cluster of stars, but a powerful emblem tied to specific deities, animals, and forces of nature. A person born under the sign of the jaguar, for instance, might be destined for a life of leadership and hidden power, while an era governed by the parrot could be a time of communication and vibrant artistry. This system reveals a cosmos where humanity was not separate from the heavens, but intimately woven into its fabric. The movements of the stars directly influenced the unfolding of life on Earth, from the destiny of an individual to the fate of a civilization. This artifact does more than add to our knowledge. It fundamentally reorients our understanding of the Maya mind. They lived in a universe that was alive, interconnected, and profoundly intelligent, a reality where a prophecy for a 13-cycle era was as practical and vital as a farmer's almanac for the coming rains. The very existence of a fourth Mayan book was once considered an archaeological fantasy. The Grolier Codex emerged not from a careful excavation but from a private collection, its origins shrouded in mystery and immediate suspicion. Unlike the other codices filled with complex tables and dense glyphs, the Grolier's pages are stark, dominated by simple, almost sketch-like drawings of deities and ritual scenes. Its style is so seemingly crude that for decades, most experts dismissed it as an obvious modern forgery. How could such a simplistic manuscript possibly stand beside the profound astronomical depth of the Dresden Codex? The controversy seemed settled, a case closed in the court of academic opinion. Yet science began to whisper a different story. Radiocarbon dating of the Codex's bark paper yielded a shocking result, placing its creation sometime between the 12th and 13th centuries. This was no modern fake. The physical material was genuinely ancient, a fragment of bark paper that had survived the humid centuries. The argument against its authenticity then shifted. Skeptics now claim that a clever forger must have obtained a blank piece of ancient paper and drawn upon it, a theory that kept the Grolier in a state of limbo for years. But the evidence for its legitimacy continued to grow. The specific type of blue pigment used in its drawings was identified as Maya blue, a unique and famously durable color whose formula was lost after the Spanish conquest. Furthermore, the deities depicted, while rendered in a simpler style, were iconographically correct, matching figures found on much older pottery and stone carvings. This was not the work of a 20th-century artist guessing at Mayan themes. It was beginning to look like the real, if humble, work of a provincial scribe. So why does this authentication matter so profoundly? Its acceptance as genuine would shatter a long-held belief that only 3 Mayan books escaped the destructive fires of time. It confirms that bookmaking was not an exceedingly rare practice confined to a few elite centers. The existence of a 4th codex, especially one of a more utilitarian and perhaps provincial nature, implies a wider, more common tradition. There could have been hundreds, even thousands of these bark paper books circulating across the Maya world, each serving a different purpose. Some were grand astronomical treatises for priests, while others, like the Grolier may have been, were simpler ritual guides for local shamans or village leaders. The loss of this vast written library now feels even more catastrophic. The Grolier Codex, in its very simplicity, argues for a literate civilization whose depth of knowledge we have only glimpsed through the 3 magnificent survivors. It is a silent testament to all the books that were burned, a ghost from a library that once was. This small piece of polished jade carries a date that upends our entire timeline. The Leiden plaque, carved in the year 320, depicts a Mayan king in full regalia standing triumphantly over a captive. But it is not just the image of a ruler that makes this artifact so revolutionary. It is the column of hieroglyphs running down its side, a complete and sophisticated text that records a specific date in the Maya long count calendar and names the ruler himself. This single piece of jewelry proves that by the early 4th century, the Maya in the tropical lowlands were not simple villagers. They were already recording their history with a complex writing system, celebrating individual rulers with a developed iconography of royal power. For decades, scholars believed such political complexity and literary achievement only emerged in the Maya world centuries later. The Leiden plaque forces us to push the clock back dramatically. It tells us that the great flourishing of Maya civilization was not a sudden explosion. It was the culmination of a long, sophisticated development happening in the jungle, a secret history written in stone and jade that we are only now beginning to read. The artistry of the plaque itself is a testament to this early sophistication. The carving is deep and confident, the figure of the king rendered with a masterful understanding of form and movement. He wears an elaborate headdress and holds a ceremonial bar, symbols of authority that would become standard for Maya kings for the next 600 years. This was not a prototype. This was the work of a mature artistic tradition, one that had already codified the visual language of royalty. To hold this plaque is to hold a seed, a single, beautiful proof that the jungle empires of the classic period were born from a much deeper and richer past than we ever imagined. How many other seeds are still buried, waiting to push the origins of Maya genius even further into the shadows of time? Deep within the temple of the inscriptions at Palenque, a hidden staircase led to one of the most magnificent royal tombs ever discovered in the Americas. Sealed for over 1,000 years, the burial chamber held the remains of Kayinish Junub Pakal, known today as Pakal the Great, who ruled for nearly 7 decades. The centerpiece of this subterranean world was his massive, intricately carved sarcophagus lid, a single slab of stone that has sparked endless speculation and wild theories. While some have famously misinterpreted its central figure as an ancient astronaut piloting a rocket, the truth revealed by the carving is far more profound. This lid is not a spaceship schematic. It is a meticulously detailed map of the Maya cosmos, a visual guide to the king's journey through the underworld and his subsequent rebirth. At the very center of the composition, Pakal is shown not ascending to the stars, but descending into the jaws of the watery underworld, symbolized by a monstrous earth creature. He is positioned on a celestial cross which represents the world tree, the central axis that connects the underworld, the earthly realm, and the heavens. Flowing up from his body is the trunk of this great tree, adorned with a serpent, and at its summit sits the bird of heaven, a symbol of the celestial realm and divine kingship. This entire scene confirms that Maya rulers were not just political leaders. They were viewed as divine intermediaries whose very death was a cosmic event, a necessary descent that guaranteed the cycle of death and rebirth for their entire kingdom. The tomb itself, with its elaborate offerings and accompanying sacrificial victims, was designed to facilitate this sacred transition. Pakal was not escaping the earth. He was traveling to its spiritual core to ensure the sun would rise again and the rains would return. This artifact rewrites history by providing undeniable physical proof of a theological system as complex and sophisticated as any in the ancient world, a system where a king's mortality was the key to his people's immortality. But the sarcophagus lid was only the beginning of the story told in that dark chamber. Resting directly on the king's remains was a masterpiece of mosaic art, his death mask fashioned from more than 200 pieces of luminous jade. This was not merely a portrait, it was a recreation of his divine essence for the afterlife. The jade itself was more valuable than gold to the Maya, a stone symbolizing water, vegetation, and eternal life. His body was further adorned with jade bracelets, rings, and a magnificent necklace, each piece confirming his status as a living god returning to the spiritual source of his power. Yet the most startling revelations were not found in the tomb itself, but carved into the walls of the temple high above. The long panels of hieroglyphs that line the inner sanctuary of the Temple of the Inscriptions form a detailed historical record, a true biography in stone. For decades, Palenque was a beautiful enigma, a city without a known history. The inscriptions in Pakal's tomb changed everything. They provided a precise, king-by-king lineage stretching back for generations before him, naming his ancestors and chronicling their deeds. This single text forced a complete revision of Palenque's dynastic history, transforming it from a mysterious ruin into a city with a documented, turbulent past. We learned that Pakal's own ascent to the throne was not a simple inheritance. He became king as a boy, following a period of great instability and perhaps foreign invasion. The glyphs speak of a forgotten conflict with the superpower of its day, the mighty city-state of Calakmul. They record a devastating military defeat inflicted upon Palenque by Calakmul's rulers, an event that nearly erased the city from history before Pakal was even born. His entire reign, one of the most brilliant periods of construction and artistic achievement in the Maya world, can now be understood as a 70-year project of restoration and reclamation, a direct response to this near annihilation. How does this change our view of these ancient cities? We can no longer see them as isolated ceremonial centers. They were rival kingdoms, locked in complex diplomatic and military struggles that shaped their very existence. The story of Pakal the Great is not just one of personal glory. It is the story of a civilization recovering from a catastrophic war, a testament to resilience written in stone and buried deep within a pyramid for over a millennium. The rivalries that nearly destroyed Palenque were not isolated conflicts. Far to the south, in the dense rainforest of Chiapas, a single building holds a brutal and beautiful testament to the true nature of Maya power. The 3 small rooms of a temple at Bonampak are entirely covered in murals so vivid and unflinching they forced archaeologists to rewrite their entire understanding of this civilization. For generations, the Maya were romanticized as peaceful stargazers, gentle priests who contemplated the cosmos. The walls of Bonampak shattered that illusion forever. Here, in stunning, polychrome detail, is a graphic chronicle of a society built on warfare, ritual, and royal spectacle. The first room sets the stage with scenes of elegant courtly life. Nobles in resplendent feathered headdresses converse, musicians play, and attendants prepare for a great ceremony. It is a vision of sophisticated refinement, a civilization at the peak of its cultural expression. But this peaceful prelude is a deliberate setup for the visceral shock of the second room. Stepping into that second chamber is like walking onto a battlefield. The entire wall explodes with chaotic, violent action. Warriors clad in jaguar pelts and elaborate regalia clash in a dense, tangled melee. You can see the fury on their faces, the dynamic motion of spears thrusting and clubs swinging. Captives stripped of their finery are shown in moments of utter humiliation and agony. One is held down by his hair while his fingernails are torn out. Another, sprawled at the feet of the victorious king, appears lifeless on the temple steps. This is not a sanitized, symbolic victory. It is a raw, almost cinematic depiction of military conquest and the brutal treatment of prisoners of war. The Maya did not hide from the reality of their conflicts. They celebrated it in full, bloody color, recording these events as central to the glory of their king and the favor of their gods. The final room reveals the ultimate purpose of this bloody triumph, a purpose that intertwines the brutality of war with the profundity of ritual. Here, the focus shifts to a grand celebration on a towering pyramid. Dancers in fantastic costumes fill the steps while the royal family looks on. The climax of the scene and the entire narrative is a ritual bloodletting. The king and his nobles are shown piercing their tongues with stingray spines, drawing forth blood that was collected on paper and burned as an offering to the gods. This act of self-sacrifice was the essential conclusion to the cycle of warfare. The captives taken in battle were not just trophies. Their suffering and eventual sacrifice, combined with the king's own bloodletting, were seen as vital nourishment for the deities, a sacred debt that ensured the continued order of the world. The Bonampak murals present a complete and unvarnished picture. They show us a civilization that could produce art of breathtaking beauty while simultaneously engaging in calculated violence, a society where the splendor of the court was directly funded by the terror of the battlefield. How do we reconcile the intellectual astronomers of the Dresden Codex with the ruthless warriors of Bonampak? The answer is that we must stop trying to fit them into our own categories of peaceful or warlike. They were both, and so much more, a people whose understanding of the cosmos demanded both precise calculation and the ultimate human sacrifice. While the murals of Bonampak captured single moments of conflict, another city chose to immortalize its entire history in stone. In the heart of the Kapon Valley, a massive pyramid supports a staircase unlike any other in the world. This is the hieroglyphic stairway, a monumental text carved from a single, ambitious block of stone. With over 2,000 individual glyphs ascending its 63 steps, it is the longest known inscription from the ancient Maya world. For centuries, it was an impenetrable mystery, a beautiful but silent monument. The glyphs were so weathered by time that they seemed like abstract patterns, the meaning locked away. But as the code of Maya writing was slowly cracked, this staircase began to speak. It did not whisper, it proclaimed the epic saga of a royal dynasty, transforming a line of shadowy, mythical figures into flesh and blood historical personalities. Each step is a chapter, meticulously recording the names, dates, and deeds of 16 successive rulers of Kapon, stretching back over 4 centuries. This was not merely a king list, it was a deliberate act of political propaganda, a claim to legitimacy carved in stone for all eternity. The rulers of Kapon wanted the world and the gods to know exactly who they were and where they came from. One name echoes through these texts with particular significance, that of the dynasty's founder, Kayanish Yaxkayuk Mo, or Great Sun First Quetzalmakor. The stairway recounts his arrival in the year 426, an event portrayed as the divine founding of the Kapon line. He is depicted as a stranger from a distant, powerful place, perhaps Teotihuacan far to the northwest, who brought a new order to the valley. For decades, scholars debated whether he was a historical figure or a mythical archetype. The stairway's detailed chronology insists he was real, a man whose actions set in motion 400 years of history. This single artifact turned the study of the classic Maya from a search for patterns into a study of people. We now know the name of the 13th ruler, Waxaclajun Yubacayahuil, or 18 Rabbit, one of Kapon's most prolific builders. We learn of his triumphs in war and his passion for the great ball game. but the stairway also records disaster. It tells of the reign of the 16th king, a ruler named Yaks Passage Chan Yopot, who faced mounting political pressures and a weakening of royal authority. The final inscriptions carved near the top of the staircase hint at the dynasty's impending collapse, a slow unraveling that would culminate with the city's abandonment. Before its decipherment, the Maya collapse was a vague, mysterious event. The hieroglyphic stairway gives it a human face and a timeline, showing us that the end was not a single catastrophe, but a gradual process of failing leadership and fractured power. How does this change our view of the ancient world? It forces us to replace the idea of anonymous, collective civilizations with the reality of individual kings, each with their own ambitions, failures, and legacies. The political landscape of the classic period is no longer a map of silent ruins, but a world of rival dynasties, each desperately carving their story into the very bones of their cities, hoping to defy time itself. The rival dynasties of Kapon carved their history in stone, but the rulers of Quiragar chose a far more fragile medium to assert their power. Deep in the jungles of Guatemala, archaeologists uncovered caches of objects so strange they defy simple explanation. These are the eccentric flints of Quiragar, and they are unlike any tool you have ever seen. Crafted from a single piece of chert or obsidian, they are not practical knives or spearheads. They are intricate, swirling sculptures, some stretching over 1.5 feet long, shaped into the forms of gods, mythical serpents, and abstract celestial symbols. The craftsmanship is breathtakingly delicate, with fine, undulating curves and perforations that seem to defy the brittle nature of the stone. Creating just one of these objects would have required a master artisan, someone who could flake away the stone with the precision of a neurosurgeon, knowing that a single miscalculation would shape weeks of painstaking work. This was not about function. This was about the ultimate display of control over the material world. Why would a society invest such immense skill and labor into creating objects that could not be used for farming, building, or even fighting? The answer lies in the blood of kings. Most scholars believe these eccentric flints were not tools for daily life, but sacred instruments for royal bloodletting rituals. Their intricate forms often depict deities associated with the underworld and visions, suggesting they were used in ceremonies where a ruler would pierce his own tongue, ears, or genitals to draw blood. This blood, spilled upon paper and burned, was believed to nourish the gods and open a portal to the spirit world. The choice of material is itself a profound statement. Flint is a common, almost mundane stone, yet in the hands of Maya artisans it was transformed into an object of supreme spiritual power. This challenges our modern separation of the practical and the sacred. For the Maya, the most potent magic could be conjured from the most earthly of materials. A simple stone, through immense skill and ritual intent, could become a key to the cosmos. Holding one of these eccentric flints, you are not holding a weapon. You are holding a paradox, an object of brutal purpose and ethereal beauty, a testament to a civilization that saw the entire universe reflected in a single, perfectly chipped piece of rock. Yet the eccentric flints of Quiragar were not the ultimate expression of Maya artistry in sacred stone. That distinction belongs to a discovery made in a royal tomb at Altan-Ha, a massive, masterfully carved jade head of the sun god Kinishahau. This single object is the largest carved jade artifact ever found in the entire Maya world. It is not a small amulet or a delicate bead, but a heavy, solid sculpture weighing nearly 10 pounds, its features smoothed and polished to a deep, translucent green. To find this in a tomb is to understand the absolute pinnacle of royal wealth and divine connection. Jade was more precious than gold to the Maya, a stone symbolizing water, life, and the very breath of the soul. For a king to be buried with an object of this size and quality was a declaration of his ultimate power and his intimate bond with the celestial forces. But how did such a colossal piece of raw jade even get to Altan-Ha? The nearest known source for jade of this quality is in the Motagua River valley of Guatemala, hundreds of miles away over rugged, roadless terrain. The presence of this head is therefore silent, undeniable proof of a vast and thriving long-distance trade network. It speaks of porters carrying immense weight through dense jungle, of merchants negotiating complex exchanges, and of a flow of goods and ideas that connected cities across the Maya world. This was not an isolated village. Altunha was a major trading hub, a place wealthy enough to commission a masterpiece and important enough to secure the raw material to create it. The head itself is a portrait of divine power. Kinish Ahau, the sun god, is often depicted with a slightly crossed eye, a filed incisor, and a distinctive, elegant nose. These features are rendered here with a serene and overwhelming authority. To hold this object was to hold the essence of the sun itself, to channel its life-giving power and its terrible, scorching gaze. This artifact rewrites history by forcing us to see the Maya economy in a new light. It was not a collection of isolated city-states, but an interconnected web of commerce, where a king's spiritual authority was literally carved from a stone that had journeyed across continents. The jade head of Kinish Ahau is more than a sculpture. It is a map of a lost world, written in the most precious substance its people could imagine. The stone giants of Tikal stand silent guard in the jungle, their weathered faces telling a story of resurrection. Among these towering stelae, one monument rises above the rest, a stone page from a history book we are only now learning to read. Stela 31 is not merely a carving. It is a political manifesto carved from limestone, documenting the reign of a king who pulled his city back from the brink of oblivion. The ruler depicted here is Siaj Chan Kayawil II, and his story rewrites everything we thought we knew about the power struggles of the classic Maya world. For generations, Tikal was believed to be a solitary, dominant power. The glyphs on this stela reveal a far more dramatic truth. They tell of a time when Tikal was subjugated, a vassal to the superpower of its age, the very city that had nearly destroyed Palenque Calakmul. The inscriptions describe a shadowy period where Tikal's monuments went silent, its kings seemingly powerless. Then Siaj Chan Kayawil ascended the throne and everything changed. His stela proclaims a momentous event, a military victory so profound it shattered the chains of Calakmul's dominance. This was not a minor skirmish. It was a war of liberation that re-established Tikal as an independent, fearsome force. But the story gets even more intriguing. The artistry of Stela 31 itself holds a crucial clue. The king's costume, his headdress, and the style of the glyphs show a profound foreign influence, specifically from the distant central Mexican metropolis of Teotihuacan. This was a deliberate political statement. Siaj Chan Kayawil was publicly aligning himself with a powerful, non-Maya tradition, perhaps even claiming descent from Teotihuacana warriors. He was leveraging the mystique of a foreign superpower to challenge the Maya superpower that held him down. In one masterful stone carving, he fused his local legitimacy with an international pedigree, creating a new narrative of invincible, restored kingship. This single artifact transforms our understanding of ancient geopolitics. We can no longer view Maya cities as isolated entities. They were nodes in a vast network of alliances and enmities, where diplomacy stretched across hundreds of miles and cultural borrowing was a calculated tool of statecraft. The rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul was not a petty feud. It was a cold war that defined the political landscape for centuries, a struggle recorded not on parchment but in the enduring skin of the earth. How many other silent stones are waiting to confess the secrets of these forgotten world wars? While stone stelae proclaimed the glory of kings, the stories of gods and heroes found a more intimate home in the hands of the people. Scattered across the ancient world, ceramic vessels painted with breathtaking artistry serve as a library in clay. These are the codex-style vases, and they were the poor man's codices, preserving the mythology that the Spanish book burnings could not eradicate. Each vessel is a canvas, its surface alive with intricate black line drawings on a cream-colored background, depicting a vibrant world of gods, monsters, and legendary heroes. Unlike the formal monuments meant for public squares, these pots were used in palaces and perhaps even wealthy households, bringing the sacred narratives of the cosmos into daily life. Their survival is a quiet act of defiance, a testament to the stories a civilization refused to let die. What tales did they choose to preserve with such care, painting them onto the very objects of their feasts and rituals? The most famous of these stories, told again and again on these clay pages, is the epic of the hero twins Hunahpu and Xbalanque. The Popol Vuh, the great creation text of the Kayich Maya, recounts their adventures, but these vases provide a visual narrative that predates the written book by centuries. We see the twins as clever, resourceful youths, outwitting the arrogant lords of the underworld in a deadly ball game. One vase might show them being burned in a great oven, only to be resurrected, while another depicts their final triumph over the death gods through a series of magical deceptions. These are not just simple myths, they are complex allegories for the cycle of the sun, the phases of Venus, and the perennial struggle between life and death. The fact that these specific stories were painted with such frequency tells us they formed the core of Maya's spiritual identity, a shared cultural touchstone that every elite member of society would have known by heart. But the vases offer more than just pictures. Flowing alongside the illustrations are columns of hieroglyphic text, a running commentary that names the characters and describes their actions. This is where the true revolution in understanding occurred. For a long time, scholars assumed these texts were simple labels, perhaps just stating the obvious like, "This is a god." The painstaking decipherment of Maya writing revealed something far more exciting. These glyphs are often direct quotes from the myths, snippets of dialogue spoken by the gods themselves. One famous vase shows an aged god, the paddler, engaged in a ritual, and the text above him reads, "He is making his offering." This transforms the artifact from a mere illustration into a primary source, a literal script from a lost play. It confirms that the stories recorded in the much later Popol Vuh were not new inventions, but were part of a living, written tradition that stretched back to the classic period. This continuity across 1,000 years is staggering. It means that when we look at a codex-style vase, we are not just looking at a beautiful pot. We are reading a page from a sacred book that was never burned, hearing the echo of a story that was told in royal courts for generations. These humble clay vessels became the guardians of a worldview, ensuring that the adventures of the hero twins would survive conquest, censorship, and the slow decay of time. The ball court itself was a portal to the underworld, and at its very heart lay a stone that sealed the pact between the players and the gods. This is the ball court marker from Capon, a heavy, circular disc of carved stone that once lay embedded in the floor of the sacred playing alley. Its surface shows a single player frozen in a dynamic pose, his body encased in thick protective padding. He wears an elaborate headdress and a belt mounted with a massive carved stone head, the standard gear of a ritual athlete. But to see this as a simple sports trophy is to miss the entire point. This player was not competing for a title. He was reenacting the most important story in the universe. The ball game was a literal replay of the Maya creation myth, where the hero twins descended into the realm of the dead to challenge its lords in a game that would decide the fate of humanity. The solid rubber ball, heavy enough to cause serious injury, represented the sun itself, hurling through its daily journey across the sky and into the dark underworld each night. The sloping walls of the court defined the liminal space where this cosmic drama unfolded, and the stone marker was the central axis, the very point where the human and divine realms touched. The outcome of the game was not a matter of local pride, it was a matter of cosmic maintenance. A victory for the home team was seen as a symbolic triumph of the hero twins over the death gods, a ritual assurance that the sun would indeed rise again, that the rains would come, and that the world would continue for another cycle. Conversely, a loss could be interpreted as a dire omen, a sign that the gods were displeased and that the natural order was in peril. This transforms the image on the marker from a portrait of an athlete into the depiction of a priest in motion. His padding was not for safety but for ritual. The heavy belt was a spiritual anchor. Every bounce of the ball was a prayer, and every goal scored was a celestial victory. The marker reminds us that for the Maya, there was no separation between the court and the temple, between the athlete and the shaman. They were one and the same, performing a sacred duty with their hips, their knees, and their unwavering faith. Yet another discovery within the sacred grounds of Palenque would force us to reconsider the very foundations of Maya power. In 1994, archaeologists working inside Temple 13, a structure facing the grand temple of the inscriptions that housed Pakal's own tomb, made a stunning find. Behind a sealed door lay a sarcophagus containing the remains of a woman, her bones and the objects around her completely covered in a vibrant red powder made from cinnabar. She was instantly named the Red Queen. Her burial was every bit as rich as that of the great Pakal himself, a fact that sent shockwaves through our understanding of classic Maya society. Who was this woman, interred with such profound honor directly beside the most powerful king in Palenque's history? The most compelling theory, based on the location and the timing of her burial, suggests she was Tiziakbu Ajor, the wife of Pakal the Great. Her tomb was not a secondary annex to his glory. It was a statement of her own immense, independent authority. The centerpiece of her funerary regalia was a breathtaking mosaic mask crafted not from jade but from hundreds of pieces of luminous green malachite. This was a stone of immense value traded over vast distances, and its use in her mask was a deliberate choice, signifying a connection to growth, vitality, and the earth itself. She was also accompanied by a treasure trove of personal ornaments, including a magnificent collection of pearls and jade, a diadem, and intricately carved shell ear flares. Every single object spoke of supreme wealth and status. This was not merely the burial of a beloved queen, it was the burial of a powerful ruler in her own right. The Red Queen's tomb fundamentally challenges the long-held assumption that Maya society was a rigid patriarchy where women were passive political pawns. Here was a woman who commanded enough religious and political influence to be entombed within one of the city's most important pyramids, her body prepared for the afterlife with a ritual splendor that rivaled her king. She was likely a key partner in Pakal's project of restoring Palenque's glory, perhaps wielding authority over religious ceremonies, economic networks, or even diplomatic relations. Her very existence forces us to see the Maya court not as a stage for men alone, but as a complex tapestry where women could hold the threads of ultimate power. How many other influential women have we overlooked, their stories still buried beside the kings we have been so focused on excavating? The divine beauty of the maize god is captured forever in the white limestone of a statue from Kapan. This is no stern, distant deity, but a youthful and strikingly handsome figure, his head elongated in a graceful arc to resemble a ripe ear of corn, his hair flowing like the silken tassels of the plant itself. His entire being is an expression of serene vitality, a perfect embodiment of the life-giving sustenance that formed the very foundation of the Maya world. To look upon this statue is to understand the most profound truth of their creation story, that the gods did not fashion the first humans from clay or dust, but from sacred maize dough. Humanity itself was, in their eyes, quite literally made of corn. This artifact transforms a staple crop into a spiritual anchor. Every stage of the maize plant's life was a sacred mirror to human existence. The seed buried in the dark earth was a form of death, a descent into the underworld. The green shoot breaking through the soil was a triumphant rebirth into the sunlight. The mature plant, heavy with golden kernels, represented the peak of life and prosperity. And finally, the harvest was a necessary sacrifice, the cutting down of the stalk so that its body could nourish the community and its seeds could ensure the cycle would begin again. This statue, then, is far more than a representation of a god. It is a portrait of humanity's own divine essence, a reminder that people, like the corn they cultivated, were part of an eternal, cyclical dance of decay and regeneration. How does this fundamental belief reshape your view of their civilization? It means that a farmer tending his milpa or cornfield was not just a laborer growing food. He was a priest participating in the original act of creation, his hands coaxing forth the very substance from which his own soul was formed. The daily act of agriculture was a continuous ritual, a partnership with the divine that sustained both the body and the cosmos. The exquisite care taken in carving this statue, the smooth planes of the face and the intricate details of the headdress, reflects the deep reverence they held for this cycle. It was a beauty born of necessity, an art that celebrated the sacred source of all life. The maize god's serene face embodies a world in perfect balance with nature, but this harmony was actively engineered through precise science. At Chichen Itza, a strange, round tower rises from the jungle floor, a structure so unique it seems to belong to another age. This is the Caracol, a complex observatory built not for kings or gods, but for the silent, steady motion of the stars. Its circular design defies the rigid, rectangular geometry of every other Maya building, a deliberate architectural choice for a singular scientific purpose. From a distance, the Caracol looks almost modern, a cylindrical tower perched on two massive platforms, its interior a labyrinth of narrow passageways and spiraling staircases that gave the building its Spanish name, meaning the snail. But the true genius of this place is not in its shape alone. It is in the strategic placement of narrow, slit-like windows carved into its walls. These were not for letting in light or air. They were precision instruments, fixed sight lines to the horizon. For generations, astronomers would have stood in the dark interior, their gaze funneled through these stone apertures, meticulously recording the passage of celestial bodies against the distant tree line. One key alignment targets the extreme northern setting point of Venus, the planet that held immense importance in Maya cosmology and warfare. Another window perfectly frames the sunset on the spring and autumn equinoxes. Imagine the scene, the last sliver of the sun sinking directly into the center of that narrow stone slit, an event that could be predicted and witnessed year after year with unerring accuracy. This was not a temple for passive worship. It was a functioning scientific instrument made of stone, a permanent, unblinking eye on the cosmos. The Caracol proves the Maya commitment to astronomy went far beyond notations in a book. They were willing to reshape their entire landscape, to dedicate immense resources and architectural skill, just to secure a clearer view of the heavens. This building is a testament to a civilization that did not merely observe the universe, but built a machine to measure its very heartbeat. What other secrets of their science are still locked in the silent alignments of their stones? The same precision that tracked the stars could turn to a far more desperate form of calculation. Beneath the calm surface of the sacred cenote at Chichen Itza lies a dark testament to a civilization bargaining for its very survival. For centuries, this natural well was believed to be a place of legend, its depths described in Spanish chronicles as a site where precious objects and human lives were offered to the rain gods. But legends were not enough. It took the daring dredging of the early 20th century to turn these stories into chilling, physical fact. From the murky water and deep silt, a vast collection of artifacts emerged, a catalogue of despair and devotion. There was breathtaking gold worked into intricate discs and figurines. There were masses of carved jade, the most precious of stones, tossed into the darkness. There were countless pottery vessels, copal incense and textiles, all gifts meant to appease the powerful deities of the underworld. And then there were the bones. The skeletal remains of more than 200 individuals were recovered, men, women, and children, confirming the most sobering part of the Spanish accounts. This was not a place of random violence. The sheer volume and quality of the offerings point to a sustained, state-sponsored ritual, a desperate dialogue with the gods conducted at the highest levels of society. The true rewriting of history comes when we understand the likely trigger for these ultimate sacrifices. The Maya world was periodically gripped by severe, multi-year droughts, periods when the rains failed and the corn withered in the fields. The cenote was a direct channel to Chok, the rain god, and the lords of the underworld who controlled the water. In such times of existential crisis, what could be more valuable to offer than a human life, the very essence of vitality? The artifacts pulled from the well provide a heartbreaking timeline of escalating pleas. It begins with pottery and jade, then moves to more valuable gold, and finally, as the drought wore on and desperation peaked, to the sacrifice of people. This physical evidence rewrites the Maya relationship with their gods from one of routine ceremony to one of profound, climate-driven negotiation. It reveals a people who, facing the collapse of their world, used the most powerful tool they believed they had, the ultimate gift, in a final attempt to bring the rains back. Beneath a nondescript mound in the Campeche forest lies a kingdom of darkness and revelation. The site is Balamku, meaning the Temple of the Jaguar, and its greatest treasure was found not at the summit but deep within its base. Explorers crawling through a narrow, claustrophobic passage discovered an underground sanctuary sealed for over 1,000 years. Its walls were covered in a stunning polychrome stucco frieze, a vibrant narrative in sculpted plaster, so well preserved its colors seemed fresh from the artist's hand. This was not a celebration of kings, but a descent into the very belly of Maya cosmology. The central figure is a sprawling, fantastic creature, a cosmic monster often interpreted as the Earth Monster. Its gaping maw represents a cave, the entrance to the watery underworld known as Xibalba. From this being emerges a scene of both life and decay, flanked by giant, benevolent toads whose skin is a mosaic of intricate patterns. The toad is a profound symbol in Maya belief, a creature intimately linked with water, fertility, and the earth itself, as it emerges from the soil after the rains. This entire tableau is believed to be the centerpiece of a powerful water cult, a regional religious variation that flourished here, far from the great power centers like Tikal or Calakmul. The frieze of Balamku rewrites history by revealing a Maya spirituality that was not monolithic. Different city-states and regions cultivated their own intimate relationships with the forces of nature, emphasizing different aspects of the cosmic order. Here, in this humid lowland, the primary concern was not the passage of Venus, but the fundamental, life-giving power of water and the terrifying fertility of the underworld. The jaguar, for which the site is named, is the lord of this dark realm, a creature that moves between the world of the living and the world of the dead with ease. To stand before this frieze is to understand that the Maya cosmos was not a single, rigid story, but a tapestry of local beliefs, each community weaving its own relationship with the gods of earth, water, and stone. How many other regional cults and their unique sanctuaries are still hidden, waiting to show us just how diverse this ancient world truly was? A king's treasure lay hidden beneath the palace floor, untouched for centuries. In the royal court of Cancun, archaeologists uncovered a secret cache that defied all expectations, a hoard of jade celts so pristine it seemed they were placed there yesterday. These were not weapons for war, but ceremonial axe heads, each one a masterpiece of lapidary art. Carved from the finest jade in shades of deep emerald and translucent blue-green, their surfaces were polished to a glassy sheen, their edges sharp and perfect. This was the royal treasury of a city that controlled the flow of this sacred stone across the Maya world. Cancun was not a city of grand pyramids, but a sprawling, wealthy palace complex that functioned as the central hub in a vast jade trade network. The sheer volume and quality of these celts represent the accumulated wealth of a dynasty, the raw capital of a kingdom built on controlling the most spiritually significant commodity in their universe. To hold one was to hold a piece of the sky and the forest, a piece of life itself, transformed by human skill into an object of ultimate power. This unlooted treasure provides a crystal-clear snapshot of a civilization at its peak, a moment frozen in time just before everything shattered. The careful, ritual placement of this cache suggests it was a final, desperate act of preservation. The king and his artisans sealed their most valuable spiritual assets, perhaps believing they would return to reclaim them when the danger had passed. They never did. The palace was abandoned, and soon after, the entire city fell into a violent and sudden collapse. This hoard, therefore, is more than a collection of beautiful stones. It is a perfect, undisturbed cross-section of elite wealth and craftsmanship, a direct line into the heart of a trading empire in its final days. What catastrophe could have been so imminent, so overwhelming, that a king would bury his greatest treasure and flee, never to return? The answer lies not in the jade, but in the silent ruins around it. The faces of gods once stared down from the pyramid at Kohenlik, each stucco mask taller than a person and radiating a serene, overwhelming power. These are not the refined stone carvings of a later age, but something more primal and immediate, enormous visages of the sun god molded from plaster and pigment directly onto the pyramid's massive tiers. Their scale is the first shock, a deliberate statement of control. To create art on this magnitude required more than a single skilled artist. It demanded a small army of laborers to mix the tons of plaster, teams of sculptors working on scaffolding, and a coordinated vision from a ruler who commanded absolute authority. These masks, dating to the early classic period around 500 AD, push the origins of Maya divine kingship back into a deeper, more formative past. We often think of the great Maya states as a phenomenon of the late classic, but Kohenlik tells a different story. Here, centuries before the famous pyramids of Tikal and Palenque reached for the sky, a local king already possessed the wealth and organizational power to transform an entire pyramid into a canvas for his divine right to rule. The masks themselves are masterpieces of early portraiture, blending human features with the symbolic attributes of the sun deity. The curved, almost feline eyes, the broad noses, and the elaborate headdresses combining serpent and avian motifs create an image of a ruler who is both man and god, a living embodiment of the celestial force that gives life to the world. This was state-sponsored religion made visible, a permanent public declaration that the king's power was not just political, it was a fundamental part of the cosmic order. How does this change the narrative of Maya development? It forces us to see the jungle not as a blank slate, but as a landscape where the idea of the god-king was already taking root, growing in power and sophistication for generations before the civilization's famous Golden Age. The quiet, giant faces of Kohenlik are not just art, they are the birth certificate of a political revolution, one that would shape the Maya world for centuries to come. From deep within the earth at Pakpatan, the sound of long-forgotten ceremonies still echoes. Archaeologists unearthed a collection of marine conch shells, each one meticulously carved and engraved with hieroglyphic texts and portraits of rulers. These were not mere decorative objects, they were functional musical instruments, sacred trumpets whose deep, resonant blasts would have filled plazas and temple courtyards during the most important rituals. To hold one is to hold a piece of the atmosphere of an ancient celebration, an instrument that gave voice to the divine. The carvings transform each shell from a simple horn into a political and spiritual statement. The glyphs name the kings who commissioned them, and the images often show these very rulers in the act of blowing the trumpets, their breath becoming the vehicle for sacred sound. This was a powerful metaphor. The king's own breath, channeled through the shell, was what called the gods to listen, what announced the beginning of a sacred ball game, or what led a procession into the heart of a temple. The trumpet was an extension of royal authority, a tool that allowed a single man's exhalation to become a sound heard by thousands, directing the spiritual energy of the entire community. But the story of these shells begins far from the inland city of Pakpatan. They are made from conch species found only in the Caribbean Sea, hundreds of miles away. Their presence in the Guatemalan highlands is silent, undeniable proof of a thriving long-distance trade network. These fragile, bulky objects had to be carefully transported across rugged terrain, passing through many hands before reaching the artisans who would carve them for a local king. This journey reveals an economy sophisticated enough to move luxury goods across continents, all for the purpose of crafting a single, perfect note for a royal ceremony. It makes you wonder what other essential elements of their spiritual life, from the feathers in a headdress to the pigments on a mural, were the result of such vast, interconnected trade. The inscribed trumpets of Pakpatan force us to listen to the past in a new way. We must imagine a world where power was not just seen in towering pyramids, but heard in the haunting call of a shell trumpet, a sound that connected the breath of a king to the depths of the ocean and the ear of the gods. The jungle had kept its greatest secret buried for 2,000 years. In a dark, subterranean chamber at San Bartolo, archaeologists uncovered a series of murals so vibrant and complex they seem to have been painted only yesterday. These are the wall paintings of San Bartolo, and their discovery did more than add color to the Maya past. It tore up the established timeline of their entire civilization. Created around 100 years before the Common Era, these stunningly beautiful scenes depict the very heart of the Maya creation myth. One panel shows the maize god in his moment of resurrection, emerging triumphantly from a cracked, split-open turtle shell, a powerful symbol of the earth itself giving birth to new life. He is surrounded by graceful, singing figures and kneeling attendants who offer him homage. The entire composition is a masterwork of line and color, a theological statement painted with the confidence of a long-established artistic and spiritual tradition. This single room rewrites history with brutal clarity. For generations, scholars believed such sophisticated mythology and the iconography of divine kingship only coalesced during the classic period, centuries later. San Bartolo proves they were wrong. Here, in a remote pre-classic temple, the entire symbolic language of Maya power was already complete. The king is shown as the human embodiment of the maize god, his resurrection guaranteeing the fertility of the land and the continuity of his people. This was not a prototype. This was the fully formed bedrock of a civilization that had been cultivating its cosmic identity for far longer than anyone ever suspected. How do you explain such perfection in what was supposed to be a formative, primitive era? The answer is that the Maya Golden Age was not a sudden dawn. It was the flowering of a deep-rooted tree, a cultural sophistication that had been growing in the dark soil of the jungle for 1,000 years before the great pyramids of Tikal ever pierced the canopy. A stone jaguar emerging from the underworld guards the throne of a forgotten queen. Deep within the ruins of El Peru Waka, archaeologists uncovered a royal tomb containing a monumental stone throne, its sides carved with the powerful, crouching form of a jaguar and its back inscribed with a history written in hieroglyphs. This was not just any royal seat, it was the throne of Lady Kaable, a woman who bore the formidable title Kalumt, a word translating to supreme warlord. For generations, the narrative of Maya power was dominated by male kings, their military conquests celebrated on towering stelae. This single artifact shatters that simplistic view. The throne's inscriptions and its prominent placement in a royal tomb provide undeniable proof that a woman could hold the highest military authority in the land, commanding armies and shaping the political destiny of a powerful city-state. She was not a passive consort or a temporary regent. She was the supreme commander, her right to rule carved in stone and guarded by the most potent symbol of jungle power. The jaguar itself was a message. In Maya belief, the jaguar was the undisputed lord of the night, a creature of immense strength and stealth that moved effortlessly between the world of the living and the spirit realm. To associate a queen with this animal was to declare her authority was both terrestrial and divine, a force as formidable and respected as any king's. The throne rewrites our understanding of the Maya court, revealing it as a stage where gender was no barrier to ultimate power, provided the individual possessed the lineage and the sheer will to seize it. How many other queens, their stories still buried, once held the title of supreme warlord, their thrones waiting to be found? The ocean was not a barrier for the Maya of Cholum, but a sacred road. Perched on a cliff above the turquoise Caribbean, this walled city represents a brilliant and distinct adaptation of Maya civilization, a world away from the jungle-bound capitals of the interior. Its art and architecture breathe the salt air, celebrating deities and forces entirely unique to this coastal realm. The most stunning examples are the frescoes that once adorned the interior of the city's temples, their faded pigments still depicting a scene found nowhere else. Here, we do not see the typical maize god or the hero twins. Instead, we encounter the diving god, a mysterious, upside-down figure plummeting headfirst from the heavens toward the sea. This enigmatic deity, repeated throughout the site, is intimately connected with bees, honey, and life-giving rain, his descent representing a divine blessing falling from the sky directly into the watery realm. Surrounding him are vibrant depictions of marine life, scrolling waves, and stylized shells, transforming the temple walls into a visual hymn to the ocean's power and abundance. This is not a minor variation. It is a complete reorientation of the Maya cosmos, where the supreme spiritual forces are those of the coast itself. How does this coastal perspective rewrite the inland-centric view of the Maya? It reveals a civilization flexible and diverse enough to develop entirely unique regional identities, each shaped by its environment. The people of Cholum did not merely import the gods of Tikal. They forged their own, born from the rhythm of the waves and the bounty of the reef. Their entire economy and daily life were built around the sea. Artifacts excavated here tell a story of sophisticated navigation and far-flung trade. They used massive conch shells as trumpets to signal across the water, crafted intricate jewelry from coral and sea snail shells, and their pottery shards reveal residues of salt, a precious commodity they harvested and traded inland. The very orientation of Cholum's main temple is a celestial compass, aligned to track the sun's path over the ocean, a guide for the canoes that ventured far beyond the horizon. This was not an isolated village. It was a bustling port, a gateway connecting the Maya world to a vast network of maritime exchange that likely stretched along the entire coast. The diving gods on the walls were more than art. They were a prayer for safe passage, for a good catch, and for the continued flow of wealth from the endless, mysterious sea. The silent prayers of common people still cling to the damp walls of the cave of Naj-Tunish. While kings built pyramids to touch the heavens, this vast limestone labyrinth served as a sacred passage deep into the earth, a place where for over 1,000 years ordinary Maya came to speak directly with the gods of the underworld. The walls are not bare. They are a chaotic, deeply personal gallery of spiritual expression, covered in hundreds of charcoal graffiti, painted handprints, and hieroglyphic texts written by pilgrims, not royalty. This is the single most important collection of Maya cave art ever found, and it rewrites the spiritual history of an entire civilization from the ground up. Here, we do not find the bombastic proclamations of a king's military victory. Instead, we read simple, heartfelt prayers for fertility, for healing, for rain. One text written in elegant cursive script might be a plea from a woman longing for a child. A nearby handprint pressed into the rock by a man over 2,000 years ago is his eternal signature, a way of saying I was here, I mattered, I reached out to the divine. This cave was not a place for state ceremony, but for intimate, individual communion. The sheer time span of these inscriptions is staggering, with dates ranging from 300 years before the Common Era all the way to 900 after, proving this was a continuous tradition that survived the rise and fall of empires. What does it mean that a farmer felt he could write a prayer on a wall, and that this act was considered just as valid as a king's bloodletting ceremony in a grand plaza? It reveals a layered spiritual world, one where elite state religion and personal populist faith existed side by side. The central belief that powered this centuries-long pilgrimage was that caves were not just holes in the ground. They were living portals, the gaping mouths of the earth that led directly to Xibalba, the watery, terrifying, and sacred realm of the dead. To enter Naj-Tunish was to cross a threshold, to step out of the human world and into a space where the veil between realms was thin. The dark, winding passages, the echoing drips of water, the overwhelming sense of being deep within the body of the earth, all of this confirmed they were in a place of immense power. They came here to make contact with ancestral spirits, to seek visions from the gods, and to perform their own humble versions of the rituals that sustained the cosmos. This artifact, the cave itself, forces us to listen to the whispers of the millions of people who are not kings or queens. Their history is not carved on towering stelae, but written in charcoal on a wall, a fragile yet enduring record of the hopes and fears that truly shaped the Maya world for over a millennium. The true cost of royal power is written on the bones of the defeated. Deep within the labyrinthine core of Temple 1 at Tikal, in a chamber designated as Tomb 116, archaeologists uncovered a collection of artifacts that stripped away any remaining romanticism about Maya warfare. These were not jade ornaments or polished ceramics, but human and animal bones, dozens of them, each one meticulously carved with intricate hieroglyphic texts and scenes of capture and submission. These inscribed bones were the ultimate war trophies, a gruesomely personal record of conquest kept by the elite. Imagine holding the femur of a vanquished rival, its surface no longer smooth but etched with the story of his defeat, his name forever bound to his conqueror's glory. This was not a secret practice. It was a public, albeit macabre, declaration of a king's prowess, a permanent ledger of his victories written on the very bodies of his enemies. The glyphs on these bones do not speak in vague terms of battle. They are chillingly specific. One bone might name a captured lord from a rival city-state, perhaps from Calakmul or another of Tikal's many foes, recording the exact date he was seized. Another might depict the captive in a pose of humiliation, stripped of his regalia, his arms bound. The texts often include the phrase, "you back," meaning his bone, directly stating that the object in the king's possession was a part of the enemy's skeleton. This transforms these artifacts from symbolic objects into concrete, physical evidence of a practice that was central to Maya statecraft. The taking of high-status captives was not just a byproduct of war, it was a primary objective. These individuals were not merely prisoners of war, they were walking, talking testaments to a king's divine right to rule, their eventual sacrifice the culminating act in a long, public drama of power. What does it say about a society that chose to record its history not just on stone, but on the remains of the people they conquered? This practice reveals a world view where the body itself was a political text, and the destruction of an enemy's physical form was the final, irrevocable erasure of his legacy and the ultimate affirmation of your own. The sheer scale of Stela H at Quiragar is an act of defiance carved in stone. Rising 35 feet into the jungle sky, it is the tallest freestanding monument ever erected in the ancient Americas, a colossal declaration of a city's sudden and total independence. Commissioned by the audacious King Kayak Tilu Chanyopot, this monolith does more than just tower over the landscape. It rewrites the entire political map of the 8th century. For over a century, Quiragar had been a vassal state, a subordinate to the mighty and ancient dynasty of Kapon. The rulers of Quiragar paid tribute, their authority subject to the approval of their powerful neighbors to the south. But in the year 738, everything changed. The hieroglyphic text that spirals up the immense shaft of Stela H records a single, earth-shattering event. The day that Kayak Tilu Chan Yopot captured his former overlord, the king of Kapon himself. His name was Waksa Klajun Yuba Kayawil, the same king celebrated on the hieroglyphic stairway for his passion for the ball game and his ambitious building projects. The stela describes his seizure in battle, an act of regicide that sent shockwaves through the Maya world. This was not a minor rebellion. It was the equivalent of a small duchy suddenly defeating and capturing the emperor of a vast empire. The political ramifications were immediate and profound. With its former master defeated and humiliated, Quirigha exploded into a period of immense wealth and architectural grandeur, financed by its newfound control over the lucrative jade and obsidian trade routes that ran through its territory. Stela H was the ultimate proof of this new order. Its incredible height and the masterful quality of its carvings were a statement that Quirigha was now a first-rank power, a kingdom that could command the resources and artistry to create a monument that dwarfed all others. The king depicted on its surface stands in full royal regalia, but his pose is one of serene, unassailable authority. He is no longer a subordinate, he is a sovereign, his victory over Kapon legitimizing his rule for all eternity. How does this single stone rewrite our history? It reveals a political landscape in constant, volatile flux, where alliances could shatter in a single battle, and the balance of power could be upended by one king's ambition. The story of the Maya is no longer just a tale of rising and falling cities, but of dramatic, personal betrayals that reshape the destiny of entire regions. While kings carved their stories in stone, the ordinary citizens of the Maya world found their voice in clay. On the small island of Jaina, off the coast of Campeche, a vast necropolis has yielded one of archaeology's most personal treasures, thousands of ceramic figurines so detailed and expressive they seem to breathe. These are not generic idols or standardized gods. They are intimate, hand-sized portraits of a living society. Here is a stout merchant, his face set in a knowing smile as he clutches a bundle of trade goods. Beside him stands a ball player, his body armored in thick padding, his eyes fixed with the intense concentration of an athlete in motion. A noblewoman strikes a graceful pose, her elaborate woven huipul dress rendered in exquisite detail, her head crowned by an intricate tower of braids and jade beads. Each figure is a frozen moment, a candid snapshot of a person who lived, worked, and dreamed over 1,000 years ago. This collection does more than illustrate daily life. It completely shatters the monolithic image of a civilization defined only by its rulers and priests. It reveals the vibrant social diversity that was the true engine of the Maya world. We see the weaver at her loom, the fisherman with his net, the musician holding his drum, the old woman with a face etched by time and wisdom. The artistry is staggering, capturing not just clothing and posture, but personality and emotion. A slight smirk on a warrior's face, a look of serene focus on a scribe, the gentle slump of a tired porter. These subtle touches transform clay into character. They humanize a civilization that can sometimes feel distant and monumental. How does our understanding of history change when we can look into the face of a common person and see not a subject but an individual? The Jaina figurines pull back the curtain on the grand stage of Maya civilization, showing us the full cast of characters whose collective lives, labors, and spirits truly built the world we are only now rediscovering. Yet even the most intimate portraits of a society cannot prepare you for the scale of a civilization reborn from the earth itself. The dense canopy of the Mirador Basin has concealed a secret for 2,000 years, a secret only now revealed by laser pulses from the sky. LiDAR technology has peeled back the green shroud of the jungle to expose a landscape utterly transformed by human ambition. Etched into the forest floor are colossal geoglyphs, vast geometric patterns, and animal forms so enormous they can only be comprehended from the air. These are not random features. They are part of a sprawling, integrated network of raised causeways, the sacred white roads the Maya called Sakbiab. These causeways do not meander. They run in perfectly straight lines for dozens of miles, connecting major cities like El Mirador and Nakb in a web of stone and plaster. This was not a collection of isolated villages. It was a single, massive, interconnected metropolis, a pre-classic state of a complexity and centralization no one believed possible for such an early period. The sheer volume of labor required to build this network is staggering, a coordinated effort that could only have been directed by a powerful, centralized authority. This was the Kan Kingdom, a name gleaned from later texts, and it appears to have been the original blueprint, the first true Maya superstate. Its existence rewrites the entire narrative of Maya development. The great cities of the classic period, like Tikal and Calakmul, were not independent inventions. They were the heirs to a political and architectural model that was already ancient, a lost kingdom whose roads connected a world long before those later powers ever rose. What does it mean that the jungle's first great civilization was not a collection of rivals but a unified whole? It suggests that the peak of Maya achievement may not have been at the end of their history, but at its very beginning. The final artifact is a small circle of polished jade, an ear spool from the tomb of a king at Altun Ha. Such jewelry was common among Maya royalty, a symbol of status worn through a stretched earlobe. This particular piece, however, held a secret far greater than its modest size. When scholars cleaned its surface and studied the glyphs inscribed around its rim, they found more than just a royal name. The text recorded a specific event, a diplomatic mission or perhaps a state visit, that directly involved a lord from the distant metropolis of Teotihuacan. For generations, the idea of a deep connection between the Maya world and the central Mexican highlands was a theory, a possibility suggested by similar architectural styles and the occasional piece of foreign pottery. This tiny ear spool transformed that theory into documented fact. It was a first-hand account, a piece of royal jewelry proclaiming an alliance or an exchange with a power thousands of miles away. The implications are staggering. This was not a case of indirect trade or cultural osmosis. This was a formal, recorded relationship between two of the ancient world's greatest civilizations, a connection that would have reshaped politics, religion, and art on both sides. How many other small, personal items are waiting in museum drawers, their brief inscriptions holding the power to redraw the entire map of the ancient Americas? With this final piece, the story of the Maya is no longer confined to the jungle. It is a narrative woven into a wider, more interconnected world than we ever dreamed. These 30 artifacts form a chorus of voices from the past, each one a direct challenge to the history books. Together, they reveal a civilization that defies simple labels, a society of profound contradictions and stunning achievements. The Maya were not a vanished mystery waiting to be solved. They were a dynamic and living people, masters of brutal political rivalries and delicate artistic expression, architects of cosmic observatories and intimate personal prayers. Their world was one of advanced celestial science, deeply woven into the fabric of their brutal warfare and their rich, layered spirituality. They were innovators who built interconnected metropolises in the jungle and traders whose networks stretched across continents. This collective evidence forces a complete rewrite, replacing the myth of a lost people with the reality of a complex civilization whose echoes still shape our world today. History is not set in stone. What other secrets are waiting to be unearthed? Let us know which of these artifacts shocked you the most in the comments below, and subscribe for more journeys into the past.